The Canon R50V is the least expensive camera that Canon makes that gives us Clog 3, which, if you think about it, it's kind of like finding filet mignon on the dollar menu. Seriously, the footage coming off this camera has absolutely no business looking this good for the price. But here's the problem. YouTube is full of people who buy a camera, they turn it on, they leave everything in auto, and then 6 months later they're online saying, I don't understand why my footage, it doesn't look cinematic. God, I hate that word. Look, it's because the camera has no idea that you're trying to be Steven Spielberg. But the good news is you don't need a film degree. You don't need to sacrifice a lamb to the camera gods. And you definitely don't need to spend 3 hours watching some guy named Sven explain color science while he's standing in a foggy forest. Oh, it's just so cinematic. You just need to understand 6 settings. That's it. And if you master these 6 settings, you're going to get more out of the Canon R50V than most people ever will. I use the same settings on every camera. My Canon R50, my R50V, my GoPro, my Mavic 3 drone, even my phone. So let's start with the one that confuses most people for absolutely no reason: frames per second. Here's the easiest way to understand it. Remember those flip books that we used to make as kids? You draw a little stick figure on the guy on every page, and then you flip through it really fast, and suddenly your terrible artwork becomes a movie. That's basically what video is. It's a bunch of still images all put together to make a video. But those still images are flashing by so fast, your brain thinks they're moving. And if you're shooting at 24 frames a second, your camera is taking 24 photographs every single second. 30 frames a second, 30 photographs per second. You get the idea. But here's where people get themselves into trouble. For normal videos, like we're doing here, talking head videos or vlogs, pretty much anything that you're shooting for YouTube, set your camera to 24 frames a second. Now, I know some of you freak shows like to shoot at 30 frames a second. I'll never understand you, but it's your camera. Do what you want. But me, I shoot at 24 frames a second. Why? Because that's the frame rate that Hollywood has used forever. It's the look that our eyes associate with movies. Cinema, you know, cinematic. Now again, some of you want to shoot at 30 frames per second. It's okay, it's legal. I'm not going to call the po-po. But to me, 30 frames a second always has that slightly weird TV news network look, right? It's not horrible, it's just different. Now, if you're shooting slow motion, that's where 60 frames a second comes in, or even 120 frames per second. Personally, I don't shoot 120 because to me, that's too slow. I've never had a need for slow motion that slow. But regardless, 60 frames, 120 frames a second, when you slow that down in your editing software, everything becomes smooth as butter. That's slow motion. So here's your cheat code: 24 frames per second, 24 FPS, that's for normal footage. 60 FPS, that's for regular slow motion. 120 FPS is for really slow motion. Done. See? One setting down already. Now let's talk about the setting that makes people panic for no reason whatsoever: shutter speed. And don't worry, this isn't as complicated as YouTube makes it out to be. There's really only one rule you need to remember. It's called the 180-degree shutter rule. Kind of a fancy name, but a very simple concept. Take your frame rate, 24 frames a second, or 30 frames a second, or 60 frames a second, or 120 frames a second, double that number, and that's what your shutter speed should be. Shooting at 24 frames a second, you use a 1/50 shutter speed. Yes, I know, technically it should be 1/48, but most consumer cameras, the closest you can get is 1/50, and that's perfect. Shooting at 60 frames a second, your shutter speed should be 1/125. And if you're shooting 120 frames a second, obviously your shutter speed needs to be 1/250. That's as close as you can get on consumer cameras. Just double the frame rate and move on with your life. And the reason we do this is because it creates natural motion blur. Too fast, everything looks jittery. Too slow, though, everything looks like somebody smeared Vaseline on your lens. So if you ever forget, just double the number of your frame rate. Congratulations. You now know 95% of what most YouTube videos spend 20 minutes trying to explain. Now, let's move on to white balance. And trust me, this is one of those settings that can make you look amazing. Or it can make you look like you've been locked in a pumpkin patch for 3 weeks. White balance tells your camera what color white is supposed to be, depending on your look, your situation, your environment. Now, it sounds simple enough until you realize that every light source has a different color. Walk through your house tonight. The kitchen lights probably look different than the bathroom lights. The bathroom lights probably look different than the lamp in your living room. And the living room looks completely different from the sunlight coming through the window. Your eyes automatically adjust to this, but your camera, not so much. So we use white balance. Now, me personally, I like to set my white balance manually. Although in this case, controlled lighting, I do set it on auto white balance because my light isn't going to change. Both of these lights are set to 5500 Kelvin, so usually I like to set my camera's white balance to 5600 Kelvin too. That way the camera and the lights are on the same page. They're speaking the same language. When those numbers match, your colors usually match up pretty well. They look natural. Outdoors though, that's a different animal. If I'm outside on the beach shooting with clouds overhead and I'm shooting with auto white balance, a cloud suddenly goes over my head, that changes the light color. And my camera freaks out and changes color. And it's dramatic. It looks horrible. Suddenly your camera thinks your entire video should now look different. So your skin tone changes, the walls change, the colors shift. And now you've got footage that looks like it was filmed in over 3 different decades. So, if possible, set a Kelvin value and leave it alone. 55, 5600, 5800, your editor will thank you later. Now, let's talk about aperture. This is one of the settings that is responsible for one of the most overused phrases on YouTube. Blurry background. And you know what I'm talking about, right? The person in the shot is perfectly sharp. Everything behind them looks like a watercolor painting. People love that look, but Aperture does help create that look. Think of Aperture as how wide open your lens is. The wider the opening, the more light gets through. But here's the confusing part. The smaller the number, the bigger the opening. It makes absolutely no sense. I didn't invent it, so don't yell at me. Like an aperture of f1.8, that is wide open, right? An aperture of f8 is a little more closed down, but an aperture of f16 or f22, it's like a pinhole, right? Now, usually when I'm shooting myself, I'll try to shoot as wide open as possible without losing focus. So that's why I shoot everything at f2.8, because I like separating myself from the background. It gives the image more depth. Now, I'm not going to get a blurry background in this situation because I'm pretty much up against the wall. But if I'm outside, wide open as I can get. But there are situations where that is the wrong choice. And usually noobs, like everything else, they want to shoot at f1.4. Don't do that. Let's say you're shooting on a beautiful beach or a city skyline or a wide landscape. If everything behind you turns into a blurry mess, nobody can actually see what it is you're trying to show them. That's when you increase your f-stop. The higher the number, the more of the scene stays in focus. Now, I get it. For portraits, you want to shoot as wide open as possible because you want the background blurry. Except when you're in some beautiful landscape, you want to show the beauty of that landscape. That's where I shoot at f5.6 or f8. So here's the shortcut. Lower number equals more blur. Higher number equals less blur. Easy. Now let's talk about ISO. ISO controls how sensitive your camera is to light. Think of it like a volume knob on a radio. You need more brightness, you turn it up. You need a little darker, you turn it down. But here's where people get into trouble. They're in a darker situation, and so they crank up their ISO trying to fix their lighting issue, and it does nothing but introduce noise and grain into your shot. We call that digital ugliness. Whatever you want to call it, the higher you push your ISO, the more chances you have of introducing noise into your footage. So generally speaking, keeping your ISO as low as possible is the way to go. I always keep my ISO at 100 if I can. But the first time I was learning this stuff, I was outside and I turned down my ISO as low as it could go, and still, I looked like I was standing on the surface of the sun. Everything was blown out. My face was glowing. I looked like I was radioactive. I remember thinking, this camera sucks. Turns out it wasn't the camera at all. I was missing something. This, a neutral density filter. And if you don't know what an ND filter is, God, I really don't want to say this, but for the new people, I have to. This is like sunglasses for your lens. No! I know it. I hear it all the time too. I'm sick of it too. but that's the explanation. It reduces the amount of light entering the lens. So if you have too much light, somehow we have to block some of that light. Otherwise, your footage is going to be way overexposed. Now, if you're planning on shooting the R50V outdoors, particularly with C-Log 3, you're definitely going to need one of these. Otherwise, you're going to end up spending half your day fighting exposure. Now, if you're vlogging, walking around or moving between shade and sunlight constantly, then auto ISO can help, right? The camera will adjust automatically as conditions change. The problem is people get into the habit of shooting everything auto shutter speed, auto aperture, auto ISO, auto white balance. That's no good because the camera is going to make mistakes. I am never going to make a mistake. I'm kidding. So whenever possible, I still prefer controlling ISO myself, which brings us to the final setting, picture profiles. This is where things start to sound a little scary, but there's nothing scary about it. Most people begin with the standard color profile. With the M50, remember the M50, the M50 Mark II? I always shot with the standard color profile. And you'll get pretty good results. The footage comes out looking nice. Colors look good. No extra work required. Shoot it, edit, upload it, done. But one of the biggest reasons people even buy the Canon R50V is because it includes Canon C-Log or C-Log 3. And this is where things get interesting. When you first switch your camera to C-Log 3, you're probably going to think there's something wrong with your camera. Trust me, there isn't. It just looks like it. Because you've lost all the color, right? The colors look washed out. Everything looks kind of gray and milky, but that's normal. Don't panic. That's exactly what it's supposed to look like before you color grade it, right? The reason C-Log looks like that, it's because it's preserving all the color information of the image. It's going to give you more highlight detail. It's going to give you more shadow detail, more flexibility when you edit. Think of it like buying ingredients to make a meal, right? Instead of a finished meal from a restaurant. You have more control over the final result. But the trade-off is that you now have more work to do, color grading. But that's where LUTs come in. LUT, L-U-T, it stands for lookup table. Honestly, nobody calls them that. Everybody just says LUT. A LUT is basically a preset for your video footage. You just apply it in your editing software and it instantly transforms flat-looking footage into something much more polished, much more cinematic. Sorry. And there are thousands of LUTs out there. There are cinematic LUTs, travel LUTs, vintage LUTs, warm LUTs, cool LUTs. I'm actually in the process right now of making my own LUTs, and they're coming out pretty good. The biggest thing is understanding that C-Log footage is supposed to look that bad at first, all right? Don't let that freak you out. That's the process. That's how it's designed. And once you understand that, you stop freaking out every time you see flat footage on your screen. So how about we just grab the camera, I'll show you the back of the screen, and we'll help you set up your camera exactly the way I have mine set up, okay? Then just try it. If you like it, leave it alone. Let's start with shooting mode. Now, I'm going to strongly suggest that you shoot in movie manual exposure. Why? Well, if you want to get the most out of this camera, then 4K C-Log 3 in manual. That's why the whole purpose of this video is to show you why we do this, right? So, movie record size. I've said it in almost every video. I realize that some of you freak shows like to shoot in 30 frames a second. I'll never understand you, but I shoot at 4K 24, okay? So that's what my camera is set up for, 4K 24. Bam. Format. Choose the very top one, XF HEVCS 10-bit 422. That is the highest quality footage that you're going to get out of this camera, right? Bam-o. Sound recording is on. Now, while you might be tempted to use 24-bit, don't do it. And I'll tell you why. You want 16-bit so that you only have 2 channels of audio. If you choose 24-bit, you're going to have 4 different channels of audio that you're just going to end up deleting once you get it into whatever editing software you use. So just use 16-bit. They sound exactly the same. There's nothing better about 24-bit. I promise you that. Now, ISO speed settings. We don't want to mess with that at all because that's going to screw up some other settings. So none of this. Color mode. Oh, here's where we get interesting. CP. Now, if you wanted to use just a regular picture style, you could do, like on the Canon R or M50, the M50 Mark II, I always used the standard color profile, and I got great results from that. But if you want to use C-Log 3, then we're not going to do that. We're going to come over to here to CP, click it, info change, and we're going to come down to C-Log 3. You could do Rec 709 if you just don't want a color grade, and I do it a lot, right? I shoot in Rec 709 often if I don't want a color grade, but because I'm showing you the full potential of this camera, we're going to choose C-Log 3 and set. Rest of it, no go. White balance, today I've got mine set to 5200. I will set my white balance always manually with a Kelvin number. And I'll do anywhere between 5200 and 5800 Kelvin. Now, auto white balance, you could get away with that if you're shooting inside with controlled lighting, and the lighting is not going to change. But we all know you're going to be shooting outdoors at some point, and if a cloud rolls over, then you're going to be in trouble. So I always do a Kelvin value. There's 5600. Let's just go with that. Okay, bammo. Custom white balance, that's a whole other video. What else? Movie self-timer? No, sir. Time-lapse movie. That's my next video. I got to show you how to do a time-lapse with this camera. Tally lamp on, of course. Image stabilizer. Now look, I am not afraid to use even enhanced on this camera, and I've never had an issue with it. But because we're going to be in a tripod today, we don't need stabilization, so we're going to turn it off. Otherwise, things do get to looking weird. But that's it. Auto leveler, I have mine disabled because I found that there's another setting that gets grayed out if you use it. So, and I know a lot of people like to use the leveler. I do too, but there's something else, and I can't remember what it is, that gets turned off when you use it. So we're not going to use it. Here's the big one. Log view assist. We want that, and we want it on BT 709. This is going to allow you to see actual color when you're shooting C-Log 3. Because if you're shooting C-Log 3, everything you see, even when you're shooting, when you're looking through the live view, the screen, you're going to see milky, very unsaturated. It's just going to look bad. This is going to make it look like you've already added a LUT. It doesn't burn that color into the footage, but you can see and get a better composition, better focus, better exposure, better everything just by having that off, okay? We're going to keep HDMI off. Unless you're using an external monitor, then you will turn that on, okay? And I do have to use an external monitor using the R50V because, let's face it, that screen just, false color and zebra. They gave us a firmware update where now you can actually turn on false color and have the view assist turned on. So that was a nice little surprise. So if you know how to use false color, then there you go. Shooting info display, you know how to do that. That's a completely new video. What else? Auto power, big one, high. Put it on high for the love of God. Auto power off, temperature high. That's going to make sure the camera doesn't overheat, so always have that on. Standby low res, I have that turned off because I'm pretty good about shutting my camera off when I'm not using it, so I don't have to worry about battery juice or any of that business. Movie servo AF enabled, yes. That keeps the focus working even when you're not shooting. I use the whole area focus unless I'm shooting photos, then I use spot AF or 1 point. But video, I use the whole area set and good. Eye detection I have on auto because I don't care. Right now I've got it registered for people priority. AF for close-up demos turned on. I like this feature. I'm going to turn it off right now because I'm not doing it, but it'll allow you to hold a product in your hand and it'll focus on that product and put you out of focus until you pull that product away, then you go back into focus. It's a great tool and I love it. Bammo. We don't care about that. Focus guide, nope, we don't care about that. And that's it. That is it. Now you might consider taking those settings and saving them to one of your custom buttons, right? The way we have it set up, you should go all the way over to custom shooting mode, register settings, and then put that in your C1, and now you never have to change those settings again. And then on custom button number 2, you might put your regular slow motion. Custom button number 3, you would put your super slow motion, 120 frames per second. If you don't know how to set up the custom buttons, there's a video right on my page. Scroll down, and it's a thumbnail of showing the camera with the custom buttons, and it teaches you how to set this thing up for total success. That is all. Carry on. Friend, did you get any value out of this video? Be honest, because if you did, could you do an old guy a solid and hit that like button? I sure would appreciate it. And listen, this is very important. If you're struggling with anything having to do with the Canon R50, the R50V, the Osmo Pocket 3 lenses, ND filters, or shooting video, leave a comment down below. Maybe I can shoot a video to help you fix that problem, or just tell me what the problem is and I'll help you fix it. Okay? Now, if you do want to learn more about the Canon R50 or the Canon R50V, here's a video right here you could take a look at. Give that one a watch and then subscribe to the channel. Okay? My name is Bo, and I gotta go. I will see you in that next video. Thank you for watching. I wish you nothing but the best of luck with your Canon R50V. Now, for the love of God, go shoot something.